Hello, welcome in. I'm sorry, it's quite later than I usually stream, but hopefully it's not too bad. I was out and about today, went to a special event with my roommates. It was quite lovely. Now I'm back home. I also do have dinner, so I apologize if I start eating in the middle of reading. With that, we're gonna start with our first story. This is a long title. First story is: my son's camera monitor alerted in the middle of the night, checked it, and saw my wife and son sitting on the bed. They weren't my wife and son. This is from RisingMac on the NoSleep Reddit. I'm a nurse, and I currently work nights. It's a total drag, but I'm hopeful I can go to days soon since some coworkers are planning retirements. Anyway, I was working one night, and just after 3 a.m., my son's monitor alerted me to a sound of movement. No big deal at all. He probably coughed loudly or sneezed or something. He's 3 now, so he generally sleeps all night. Bring it up on my phone and I see him and my wife sitting on the bed. Again, no big deal. He might have cried out or gotten scared or something. I was about to close the app and I noticed they were acting strange, almost creepy. And when I say almost creepy, I mean creepy as fuck. They were sitting on the bed together, both of them, just staring up at the camera with blank, emotionless stares. The night vision is black and white, so they had white, eerie-looking eyes. They didn't move at all aside from their visible breathing, just sat there, staring at the camera. I close the app and give my wife a call to make sure everything's okay. I never get to call home on lunch, so in a way this was kind of nice to get to talk to my family while at work. It rings a couple times before she answers it with a very groggy, hello. It was like she was dead asleep when I called and she looked wide awake on the camera. Hey, you guys okay? Oh, yeah, buddy, my son's nickname, came in like 15 minutes ago. He seemed scared, so I said he could sleep with Mama. I'm confused here since I saw them in his room a minute ago. Literally 60 seconds had passed since I closed the app and made the call. Wait, so you guys are in bed? Yeah, I fell back asleep right away. Is everything okay? Everybody keeps waking me up. She's kind of annoyed. Hang on a sec. Put her on speaker and bring up the app, hoping I don't see it. When the app loads, I get a pang of intense nervousness in my stomach that I haven't had in a long time, since I was a kid in school and realized I was eating breakfast. I was eating breakfast of paper or something, was due that day, and I hadn't done it. My heart leads into my throat. My wife and son are still sitting on his bed looking up at the camera. Same emotionless stares. Hello? You guys are in bed, right? Yeah, we're trying to sleep. Well, I'm looking at his camera and I see you two sitting on his bed. Huh? No, we're in our bed. I know that's what you mean, but I'm looking at his bed and you two are in there. Hang on, she says. She's quiet for a second. She brings up the camera on her phone. You hear this guttural, terrified gasp, like she had sucked all the air in the room into her lungs, filling them to capacity. I don't hear this kind of gasp from my wife often, only when she's truly afraid, like during a jump scare in a movie, or one time when she turned her back on her son literally for a second, and he was down by the mailbox inches from the road. I hear rustling of sheets and the line goes dead. Of course, now I'm absolutely terrified myself, so I immediately call back. It goes to voicemail, so I call again. Call again and again with no answer. Finally, after about 4 minutes, she calls me. I tell you that 4 minutes felt like 40 years. Hey, what's happening? I ask. She's absolutely hysterical and crying. I can't understand a word she says. Stop, slow down, just for a second, I say. She slows down enough to explain that they're in the car and driving to her parents. She looked at the camera and when she saw what was on it, She got up and grabbed our son and rushed downstairs and out the door. Didn't even close the garage. Don't worry about it, I said. I'll drive by when I get off and close it. We live in a generally safe neighborhood, so I'm not too concerned if the door is up. You will not go in there, she says. Hell no, I return. Why are we on the camera, she asks. Is it a recording? I don't know, I return. I'm gonna keep watching and see if there's anything I can tell. Do our code words with Buddy. We have code words because we're nerds. Simple as that. We've seen too many pod people in imposter movies, so we decided a long time ago to make code words with each other to be able to tell if one of us was an imposter. We have a couple code words, but we also have a 3-sentence story we recite to each other, each saying a different part alternately of each other. I hear her on the phone saying the things that we taught our son. He giggles as he says them. He does every time we practice, since he thinks they're a joke and doesn't have any idea of the real meaning. We're both convinced he's our son. My wife then says our part, and I'm convinced she's her. We made up these words as a complete joke to ourselves. I never once in my life ever imagined we'd actually need them. Unreal. She got to her parents safely, and it was hard to hang up. I told her we'll figure it out in the morning. Hopefully, maybe it's just a glitch. She said she didn't think it was a glitch. When she was running out, she had run by her son's room and the door was open. There's a little flashing light on the back of the camera that indicates it's connected to the internet. It gives off just enough light that when she ran by, she thought she saw, out of the corner of her eye, a shadowy outline of what could have been an adult sitting on her son's bed. It sends chills down my spine to think about it. Knowing they were safe and out of the house is the only thing that kept me at work that night. It was a long 4 hours, but I kept checking the camera every chance I got. Sure enough, they were still sitting on the bed, staring up at the camera with emotionless gazes. I studied them to see if I could see any pattern from their breathing to their blinking. Their breathing was steady and looked normal. It was their blinking that would tell me if this was just some kind of bizarre, time-looped freak accident video or not. I intently stare at my phone and count the seconds between each blink, telling myself, if this is a loop, then their blink should be even and occur at the same time each time. There was no pattern to their blinking. It was erratic and random, just as a person blinking should be. Passing hours are what finally sealed the deal that this was not a weird loop video of some kind. My son's window is visible on camera, and I can see on camera that it is like getting lighter outside in his room. His curtains keep out just enough light to prevent the camera from exiting night vision, but less than just enough to be able to tell as the sun is rising. Hi Bus, welcome. I try to figure out what the hell I'm going to do before I leave work. Calling the police seems to come to mind, but I talk myself out of it. First of all, what am I supposed to say? Someone is in my house that looks like my wife but isn't? Worse yet, what if they are entities of some kind, and the police do go over and it kills them or something? I decided to tell a coworker about it. He's a firm believer in the paranormal and might have a suggestion. I show him the video and tell him the story. His initial response of, "That's creepy as fuck," doesn't help much, but he says he wants to go over and check it out. He says we both should see if not my wife will try to act like my wife. I tell him absolutely not, and he says that we should at least go to the house even if we don't go in. I agree on that since I wanted to close the garage. We got to my house and walked around the perimeter first. Not sure what we wanted to accomplish by that, but it felt like something we should do. The curtains were all drawn since nobody was there to open them in the morning, so we couldn't see anything. I went to close the garage and suddenly had this overwhelming urge to go inside and investigate. It was like I just had to know what was going on. So we went in. We walked through the kitchen towards the foyer where the stairs are. It's so quiet in our house right now that you could hear a feather drop, forget the pin. We stop at the bottom of the stairs and wait a few seconds. Look at the camera again and they're still sitting there. I've never been so scared in my life. My coworker puts his foot on the first step and I suddenly say stop, loudly. Forget this, we're out of here, I tell him. Come on. I start making my way back to the kitchen. You hear a loud creak in the floor from upstairs. It's my son's room. He has a very loud, creaky board right in the middle of the floor that's almost impossible not to step on. My wife and I are still deciding if we ever want to fix it because it will alert us if he's ever up to no good when he gets older trying to sneak out or something. Come on, I yell as I motion for him to move his ass. We're out of the house in about 2 seconds. Out on the street, I checked my phone. Now, only not my son was sitting on the bed. Same blank stare. Not my wife was gone. Holy shit, my coworker says. How stupid as fuck of us. Do not tell my wife that we went inside. She would be so ungodly mad if she found out what we just did. I use my garage door opener in my car to close the door. Before we leave, I look at the camera again. Now my wife is back in the bed with not my son, while staring blankly up the camera, blinking every few seconds. That was about 4 days ago now. Not my wife and not my son are still sitting on the bed staring up at the camera. They haven't moved a millimeter. They obviously haven't gone back to our house. What should we do? It's part 2. So, for anyone wondering where that popped in, this is the NoSleep Reddit from RisingMac. My son's camera monitor alerted in the middle of the night. I checked it and saw my wife and son sitting on the bed. They aren't my wife and son. Part 2. I'm sorry it's taken so long. It's been an emotional month. I felt like I've been losing my mind or already lost it. I've been in the hospital for 3 weeks. You'll remember I left off at my wife's parents' house, not sure what the hell to do. My wife and I argued about it. My in-laws said call the priest. I told my wife we're calling the cops, and that's it. The day we finally called the cops would be day 6. Not my family was still sitting on the goddamn bed, staring at a camera. I told the dispatcher that they were intruders in my house, leaving out the part that they looked exactly like my family. I told her we were out of the house, but I would meet the police there. She dispatched 2 units. My wife begged me not to go. I told her I had to be there. I had a foolproof plan. Urkides353, thank you for the follow. Enjoy the spooky horror stories. I would take her mom's iPhone and FaceTime with my wife while showing the police the camera on my phone. They would see this as a fucked up situation and hopefully proceed with caution. My coworker friend said he would come with me as well. My friend and I beat the cops to my house. Like most of you mentioned in the comments previously, I was packing heat. Okay then. I have a concealed carry, so I had my 1911 45 on me. Okay. I was not concerned this would bother the cops as I was going to inform them of my permit and that I was currently carrying. What I wasn't going to tell them was that I had my father-in-law's AR-15 in the trunk. I was not aware of this part too. I'd like to formally apologize. It's almost funny how many of you mentioned that that was the way to go in my previous entry. I didn't plan on telling the cops about it because I was not planning on needing it. They would come armed and prepared. They showed up and I let them know that I was armed and then enacted my plan. I initially told them the story. They looked at each other like I was crazy and they didn't believe me. I FaceTimed my wife so they could see she was in fact not in the house despite what her camera was showing. They still didn't seem to believe me, but this did pique their interest. I hung up with my wife and told her I would call her back as soon as we knew something. So now we're sure this isn't a recording, an officer stated, repeating what I said. It's not. The day-night cycle has changed every day. Their blinking is erratic and not cyclical? Okay, sure. Oh. Cyclical. Like it was on repeat, I said. I know it's a stupid question, but your wife isn't a twin? The other officer asked. I told him no. My friend spoke up. I have an idea. Turn the volume up. I'll go throw a pebble at the window. He went around back. I turned up the volume to max. Okay, I'm tossing. We heard the light tick sound from outside. The 1-second delay in the camera came in loud and clear through my phone. Not my wife moved at the sound of the pebble hitting the window. First time I'd actually seen her move aside from the time she wasn't on screen when I initially went inside her house the first day. She turned her head towards the window just slightly before turning back to the camera. Okay, so this is live, an officer said. Okay, sir, I need you and your friend to stay outside here. We're going to go in and find out what's going on there. How spooky are their stories? It's a little bit spooky. Hi, Nabu. Shouldn't you ask for more units? I asked, hopefully. Not at this time. We're going to assess the situation first. They don't appear to be armed, but we're going to be cautious. I opened the garage for them and they made their way in towards my kitchen door. They radio dispatched that they were headed in and to stand by. They disappeared into my house. A few seconds after they went in, the camera went out. I wanted to vomit. I felt like if I put my fingers to my mouth, I'd be able to feel my heart since it had leapt up so far into my throat. Shit! I yelled to my friend. I immediately popped the trunk and got my rifle out and ran to the garage, my friend right behind me. I got inside just in time to hear a low, guttural howl from upstairs, demonic sounding almost, along with raised voices from the police. There were several shots. Need backup! Shots foot! He was cut off. Oh my god, my friend howled. He was scared shitless, but so was I. God fucking damn it, I knew it, I said, running up the stairs. My son's room is the first one you come to after getting upstairs, so his wall is also what you see as you walk up the stairs. As I reached the top, I laid into the wall with my rifle. It was a 30-round magazine, but I felt like I fired 100 shots. I fired all over the place, knowing full well the ammo would go through the wall like it was paper, concentrating on where my son's bed would be, also near the door and towards the floor, as well as in case whatever these things were thought to duck. Hi, game, welcome. We heard shrieks of pain coming from the room, then nothing. My friend and I paused for a minute before deciding to go in because the camera was still out. We heard a whimpering coming from the room. There was a dead cop in the hallway and we had to step over. It was awful, but I'll never be able to unsee it. His head was several feet away from his body and the threshold to our guest room. We found the other cop in my son's room right inside the doorway. He had several large holes in his torso as if he had been impaled. Exactly what I was afraid would happen had happened. I called the cops and whatever these things were, killed them. When we entered the room, we found the source of the whimpering as not my wife. She was laying on her back on the floor, holding her torso that was bullet-ridden and breathing heavy. The scene was awful. I can hardly put into words how awful it was. I know now, just like I did then, they weren't my family. It shouldn't have been hard, but I should have been able to just go in and finish it. But instead I fell to my knees. Not my wife begged for her life. I don't want to die, honey, she whimpered. I want to have more kids. I can't die now. I looked over at not my son, who had to be dead. He'd taken 2 shots at least to the head, or what was left of it. He had several more in his torso and 1 or 2 on his legs and arms. If you have kids, seeing their lifeless, bullet-ridden body is a special kind of hell. Again, I knew it wasn't my son, but it was. I was going to be sick. I killed my family. I turned back to not my wife. She was acting just like my wife. It even mimicked her anxiety about death that she has had in the past year or so. It's not her, man. I forgot my friend was even there. It's not her. Shoot it. Horror story? No, horrific story. I know what you guys are thinking. How many times has this happened in the movies and you scream at your TV for the main character to go shoot the imposter because it's not their loved one? I guess movies get it right somehow. I'll never roll my eyes at the character who can't kill an imposter again. Please, don't shoot me, I begged. My hands were shaking as I aimed at it. Why couldn't I do it? I knew. This wasn't my wife. Listen, man, my friend began calmly. Look at it. His blood is yellow. It's not your family. It was yellow? It was. See, my family slain was so traumatic I haven't even noticed the blood wasn't red. I studied my aim and not my wife suddenly stopped begging. She began that guttural, terrifying shriek and something black or gray started to protrude from her mouth. Like a tentacle or something, and I fired. At that range, her head more or less exploded. Whatever these things were, they appeared to be mortal. I was still on my knees and my friend was out in the hallway just outside the door. I heard the sounds of approaching police sirens. I'd forgotten one of the cops had gotten a shots fired call over the radio before being killed. It seemed like it had been hours, but it had only been about 5 minutes since the police had gone in. My friend went downstairs to let the police know what to expect. I stood up slowly and made my way into the hallway. I was lightheaded and felt like I was going to be sick. The bedroom is adjacent to my son's, so the doorway is about a foot to the right of my son's doorway. My door is closed, but as I exited my son's room, my door opened. Not me walked down into the hallway wearing exactly the same thing I was at that time. I was shocked in place. I couldn't move, but he did. It walked towards me and its right arm turned black and morphed into what appeared to be a tentacle. It was wriggling around like a squid or octopus appendage. When he thrust his arm at me, it solidified and impaled me through my abdomen, then stabbed me into the left leg, just above the kneecap. I fell to the ground in pain. His tentacle arm was wiggling again. "Why did you kill my family?" it asked. When it spoke, his voice changed pitch several times. It was my voice, then much deeper, then normal again. It alternated several times saying that one sentence. I moved in closer. The rifle was gone, but I still had my .45. I pulled it out and it got a shot off in his right knee. It howled. As Not-Me fell to his knee, I fired a couple more shots, getting 2 shots in its abdomen and left side of its ribs. I breathed heavily for a few seconds before I used the last of my strength to aim proper and shot Not-Me in the face. His blood was also yellow. I lay there bleeding out, thinking this was it for sure. I still had some strength from adrenaline kicking in, so I took off my belt and tried to make a tourniquet for my leg. With my stomach wound, it was hard to give it a good yank to tighten it. I then took off my shirt off and balled it up and packed it into my stomach wound as applied as much pressure as I could. Being a nurse probably saved my life. I passed out and the measures I took must have kept me alive long enough to get for the EMS to arrive. I heard raised voices and the sound of pounding coming up the stairs before I went out. It was probably a cop, but I felt pressure from somebody trying to keep my wound packed before I went out. I was in and out of consciousness as the EMS arrived along with probably every cop in the city. I was wheeled downstairs and put in an ambulance. But while I was being loaded onto the gurney upstairs, I heard cops freaking out, and rightfully so. They'd lost 2 brothers, and there were 3 other bodies. Did he kill his brother? Are they twins? Probably referring to Not-Me's dead body. Or his whole family? Put on armed guard while he's at the hospital. He'll probably be getting charged. As I was getting placed in the ambulance, I saw my friend talking to a group of about 10 cops, all listening very intently to what he was saying. I went out again in the ambulance. I woke up in the ER. My wounds had been treated. The tentacle had been more than a few inches wide, so it was just slightly larger than a large knife. It sewn me up, and I had found that I was currently receiving a blood transfusion due to the loss of blood at my home. My wife had authorized them to do whatever they needed while I was unconscious. I was also extremely pissed that I went into the house. We're okay now, but that's a story for another day. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks since I ended up getting an infection and almost went septic. I needed quite a few antibiotics. For the entire 3 weeks, I had cops in my room with questions. After about a week, they released me and no longer had me under armed guard. I told them absolutely everything, not caring if it made sense or not. Thank God my friend had come with me, since he was able to corroborate with this weird story. Midway through my hospital stay, men with suits came to pay me a visit. They were government, I knew right away. They said they were FBI, but I don't know if I believe that. They wanted to talk about my family. The police chief and the coroner were involved, and it was very hush-hush. It made it clear that this was not to get out to the public. This is where I have to apologize probably for the anticlimactic ending to this ordeal. I don't know what Not-Me and my family were. Neither do they. The only thing we know is that they were sentient creatures that looked like us and had yellow blood. I begged the coroner to tell me about their autopsies, but he said he wasn't allowed to say. He must have felt bad for me, since I received the bouquet of flowers a couple days later. The card inside the envelope read, "We don't know what they are. They have the same organs we do, but in different parts of the body aside from their brain. But what's red and pink inside us is green and yellow inside them. They're humanoid creatures, but whatever they are, aren't human. Government thinks that they might be extraterrestrial. Destroy this letter ASAP. We had our house professionally cleaned. It was almost surely a government team, since they contacted us, quote, on behalf of the police. We could not find any Google reviews or website for the company online. My wife and I are not going back to our house. We would love to burn it down, but there's no way to do that and avoid suspicion of arson at this point. We'll end up taking a huge loss on the property since everyone in our neighborhood knows that there was an incident involving multiple deaths in the house, but don't know what actually happened. It'll be hard to sell, but eventually it will. We're going to move on from here. I told everyone at work that there was a home invasion and they bought it. I'll go back to work in a couple weeks and we'll start looking for a new house. Again, I'm sorry. I know everyone wanted a concrete ending and to know exactly what the fuck those things were, but we just don't know. Alien sounds good to me. I've been thinking if they were supernatural or actual demons, gunfire wouldn't have been able to kill them. It's just hard to say. If they were aliens, why did they just sit there and creep in our house for a week? They didn't even try to take over our lives. It's hard to wrap my head around. If it is aliens, keep your eyes peeled out there. There could be more of them. Well, that was part 1 and 2 of my son's camera monitor alerted us in the middle of the night. I'm gonna take a brief moment to eat some of my dinner. Smoothie. Trying to find ones that aren't super cliche, as some kind of are. What's for dinner? Wendy's. I got the saucy nugs, the garlic parm spicy saucy nugs, and some fries. Honestly, they're pretty good. Sheesh. Ooh. That was a creepy one. That sounds tasty. Good. Do we want to hear about the Swamp Town cryptids? I'm trying to be very cautious in the ones that I'm finding because there is a discrepancy. There's rules in here. But I do want to give credit to the people that have written these stories. Let's go to part 1. I saw part 2 in here, so we're gonna go part 1. Alright, I'm gonna eat one more nug. Sounds spooky. Apparently that doesn't seem right. Apparently this was uploaded 2 days ago. This is from Curious19331. Let me tell you about my Swamp Town's Cryptid, Part 1. Nobody on Earth needs to see the mire drip. Wasn't even like we was asking for it. Apparently this has a dialect, I'm sorry. Reminiscing now sends a shiver down my spine. Just thinking about the thing. It's the scars on my chest crawling. Even still, it gets stuck in your head. Pheromones, or something like that. Every time you gaze into its swamp, no matter who you are, you can't help but feel the clammy air against your skin and the pungent odor. Rotting vegetation, stagnant water, and moldy vanilla that never truly leaves your nostrils. You have to ask the thing that no one wants to talk about, like an itch needing to be scratched. I was out with Harley on that day. I still remember how beautiful she looked to me, her auburn pigtails swaying side to side and her big ol' freckled grin. My boy Finch was there too, on cowlick and toe, the both of us competing for whatever smiles and winks we could get out of Harley. She got on about the government covering up Mothman, which turned into talking about Bigfoot, which of course devolved into a conversation about the Meyer drip. Back in the day, I didn't care what we were talking about as long as it was Harley's sweet voice. The girl made my heart sing songs. When she said she wanted to go, I couldn't say no. It was right in the middle of our sophomore summer break, and I had promised myself that before the end of it, I'd take her out to the swamps to dance with the fireflies and kiss her. This was another stepping stone to reach that goal, you see? Our venture into the swamp wasn't anything special, humid air clinging to our skin and the dampness seeping into us, making our clothes all heavy. Croaking frogs, chirping birds, and constant rustling. When I was young, I grew to love the scent of it. Ancient vegetation, the stagnant water, its own ecosystem. You got to know it. But what old Finchy did that day to try and impress Harley, well, he did ruin all of that. You see, Finch walked up to the old swamp road like he owned the place and tossed down a rabbit he had killed with his father that morning. The way he stood over the dead skin thing in his hands on his hips made my stomach churn. "Come on out," he drawled. "Supper's up, Mr. Meyer Drip. Where are you at?" I remember Finch that morning had planned to cook the rabbit for breakfast, but instead made a joke about some blood being all he needed to bring out the demon. My heart pounded in my chest and a cold sweat broke out on my skin. Air's thickness became oppressive. Every breath heavy with the scent of decay. My fingers started tingling and the sack of potatoes fell into the pit of my stomach. You shouldn't have made a joke like that. I remember me and Harley backing away from him. I forced a smile as our feet made sucking noises in the mud. Then my chest caught fire. Not literally, but beneath my skin. The worst damn infection possible. I ripped my shirt off and Harley's pink lips opened wide as she screamed. A blister had swelled up right in the center of my chest. A big, nasty son of a bitch. Big as a fist. I poked it just once and it burst like a damn firecracker. The liquid inside sprayed a metallic gunk. Like what's in the thermometer and... What? Like what's in a thermometer? And blood poured all over me. Sure. My skin burned worse than any fire. It was like molten earth, like hot lava. Then the stink hit me. The fumes were sulfuric and mixed with the repulsive stench of sweet and vanilla, so rank it made me gag. Oh, yucky. Despite it being early noon, the whole swamp changed, bathed in a pale mauve smoke. All the frogs and bugs fell silent, leaving an eerie quiet that only amplified my dread. My skin started prickling, my heart boomed like a bass drum in my chest. Finch got the second blister, a baseball-sized... Okay, a baseball-sized blister. It says mother. Like, motherfucker. Sure. Right above his eye, it swelled grotesquely, a shiny reddish-violet mound, before finally bursting and oozing out the thick metal oil. He screamed, clutching his face and cursing himself for being dumb as hell. Just desperate, he scurried back to the rabbit. I don't know, he was probably convinced that retrieving his offering might set things right. A sudden downpour had already raised the swamp's water level, and the skinned rabbit was now halfway submerged in the murky, fetid waters. When did it start raining? The stench of the rotten vanilla hung in the air. Finch's fingers trembled as he reached down to pick up the rodent, the cold, slimy water splashing against his skin. Just as his fingers brushed the rabbit's fur... Not the rabbit. I thought it was skin. My instinct screamed into my limbs. The weight of the gas made every breath thick and heavy. My knees were gibbering, begging me to buckle and run, but I was unable to tear my eyes away. The Meyer drip emerged from the swamp. It was made of liquid algae and shimmering mercury like oil, stuff that's in the thermometers, and covered in clusters of mauve-colored milkweed. It boasted a large luminescent eye like the search beam of a lighthouse, and a gaping blood-red mouth. Metal ooze dripped onto Finch as he screamed, completely enveloping him in those bursting boils. They erupted in rapid succession, detonating with such force it seemed as if someone were lighting him up with a machine gun. Finch collapsed, and the mire drip pressed its suction cup mouth into his guts, sucking up what had spilled out of him with a high-pitched, consistent roar. Okay. Watching my best friend being consumed stabbed at my heartstrings. But when Harley stumbled in after him, my heart was ripped right out of me. I suppose she answered a question about which one of us she liked more. She stopped halfway to Finch and found herself caught in the mire drip's spotlight gaze. The gas had an adverse and sudden effect on me. Everything started to blur and shake. For a moment it seemed like Harley had 3 heads. The fluid leaked from her ear, same as the silver mercury that made up of the mire drip. And then she collapsed onto her side, and the horror slid onto her. Damn right I took off. That mauve, noxious vanilla swamp gas engulfed everything, made you hallucinate something awful. I saw bats swooping and giant death-headed moths fluttering on my way out, but I kept pushing. Years later, and it still hasn't gone away entirely, I still get the delusional bat beast fluttering in the corner of my eye, waking me up at night. Oh, okay. Of course, no one believes my story except those who already know about the mire drip. Lawman still tries to squeeze information out of me, but about Finch and Harley. He got real uppity when some fancy suit folks came asking me questions. But I just play dumb. Don't answer too many. Don't stir up no more trouble than I already have. Anyone living in the swamp knows better. If you know, then you already understand those are the mire drip swamps. There's apparently a part 2 to this. Do we want the part 2? I'm not feeling the part 2, I'll be honest. But if you guys want the part 2, then we'll do it. This is a wild one, it certainly is. Juvenile? Is it? Yeah. Yeah. Definitely kind of seems like some kid in like middle school, high school, trying to write out a spooky story. Yeah, like it's not bad. I think it's just not my taste. You know what? That's okay. I think part 1 gave us a good ending. I think I got flip a coin. Fair enough. Flip a coin, heads we continue, tails we do not. Flip a coin, flipping. It's heads, we continue. Thank you, Unknown, for the glasses. I'll take them off. Lock them in. Alright. Let me tell you about the Swamp Town Cryptid Part 2. Thank you for the water. Actually, you also have a berry pomegranate lemonade from Wendy's. Very yummy. Very refreshing. Alright, part 2. I will now recount the events of the Cypress Point incident. It happened too fast for those poor kids to comprehend. It was Liz Durallo's 13th birthday, the day when summer fun turned dreadful. They all had heard the legends. Those 3 had played in the swamp their entire lives and truly believed they had nothing to fear. Liz's best friend Emily always had the best intentions. She was a sweet girl who never wanted to hurt anyone, but she often called Liz quote, beanpole, despite Liz scowling at the name. On Liz's 13th birthday, Emily took her and her little brother Roland, on an errand in the swamp. Emily had planned to make Liz a crown out of the pretty violet flowers, but they spotted a bunny with a broken foot struggling in the swamp grime. Despite Emily's buck-toothed little brother, Roland protests against the swamp's methane stink. Little Emily's heart melted at the sight of the injured critter. Liz fought back tears as she watched Emily gently lift the panicked bunny, while the swamp's buzzing cacophony of unseen wildlife droned through the atmosphere. Young Roland agreed that they should help, but Liz tried to argue that her grandfather warned her to never mess with the rabbits in the swamp. As if jinxing her, poor Emily immediately tripped and fell, landing hard on the wounded bunny with a crunch, as if collapsing atop a bag of glass. Emily lay frozen on her belly, and with tears streaming down her cheeks. The swamp's chorus of croaking frogs and buzzing insects ceased. Cryptic silence turned fetid. Liz's grandfather had told her stories of the pink gas, potent and choking vanilla, worse than any fecal swamp fart. The dank flavor clung to the back of Liz's throat like barbs. She gagged, nearly vomiting. Emily gazed down at the rabbit's innards, splattered on her coveralls, but Liz wasn't looking behind her. A mound, big and silver and green, was rising from the swamp. Emily turned, and her scream lasted only a moment before her tongue swelled up and burst like a water balloon. Lovely, Emily. Liz acted swiftly, seizing Roland's hand, his small trembling fingers wrapped around hers. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. The mire drip's roar echoed behind her, its deafening howl reminiscent of an industrial-sized hairdryer combined with a cement mixer. Mickey. She didn't dare look back, keeping her eyes fixed on the path ahead and leaving Emily behind. Despite this small stature, holding Roland's clammy hand provided a comfort until it became wrong. Oh, 7, little guy. Roland's hand transfigured instantaneously, changing from damp to soft and fuzzy. Liz's heart skipped a beat when Roland screamed, his voice turning high-pitched and distorted. Whiskers sprouted from his face, and his large buck teeth grew to the size of a beaver's. His bones audibly stretched with sickening cracks and pops that echoed through the quiet swamp. His eyes widened in terror as his transformation continued, twisting his small body into something unrecognizable. Liz let go of his hand, covering her mouth in horror. She could feel her heart pounding, her hands trembling. Roland hit the swamp floor and shrank down until disappearing into his clothes. The sound of his bones cracking and skin stretching was accompanied with the pungent stench of the swamp, the sickly vanilla haze, and the metallic tang of blood. Staring at his empty clothes, the choking, thick pink air became too much, his bitterness coating all of her esophagus, her eyes fixed on a lifeless heap of fabric. Roland? She asked, all but pleading. From within Roland's clothes, a small brown hair emerged. Liz watched in stunned silence as it twitched its whiskers and stared at with beady black eyes. The hair squeaked once before scurried away into the woods. Liz Dorello was found in the swamp 2 days after she had originally gone missing. This is the story she would go on to tell. She's among the growing number of alleged survivors of the Mire Drip. They reported on similar creatures in both the saffron and goldenrod accounts. It's hard to tell if the legend is spreading because the monster leaves these survivors, so more will attempt to trace it, or there is something more sinister at play. Every survivor suffers from what we've labeled as mire fever. They experience psychotic episodes and will only speak about the Mire Drip as a relentless predator. Liz Dorello, like the others, endured these episodes, often trembling at any of the various episodic triggers. She often describes the eerie pink mist associated with the Mire Drip's specific strand of swamp milkweed. thick and pungent, with the stench of decay and vanilla that lingers in one's nostrils. Other symptoms include PTSD associated with recalling ghastly sounds, the whispers of the swamp, ghosts of victims, and the sickening pop of human blisters. These shadows trigger episodes, as well as piles of loose cloth in Liz's specific case. Liz Dorello recently kicked the bucket after stockpiling meds, a sad but predictable end that's become the norm for anyone who's tangled with the mire drip. This nasty creature seems to have a taste for those who engage in its specific creepy rituals. But since it's only terrorizing its local swamp, containment hasn't been deemed critical. However, with global warming possibly shifting its hunting grounds, I'm requesting additional funds to nail down specifics and figure out how to contain this beast before it broadens its reach. Apparently there's a YouTube video that accompanies this. That was part 2. There doesn't seem to be part 3 because this was updated today. So maybe in the future there's a part 3. But we're gonna go back and find another story. Yeah, it's new, it's fresh. I am once again gonna eat a little bit of my dinner as I look for another story. Yeah, I'm super new. Well, this one sounds kind of interesting. My job is watching a woman trapped in a room. It was made 5 years ago. It sounds interesting. I like that. Alright. Pulling this one up. Alright, this is from Verastahl. NoSleep Reddit. My job is watching a woman trapped in a room. Three years ago, I was looking at the local job classifieds online when one of the ads caught my eye. Not because of what it said, but because it said so little. Thus I remember the ad just read, "Job available. Good pay, no benefits, discretion required." Then listed an email address, and that was all. At the time I was managing a music store, but I had already started hearing rumors we would be shutting down within the next year, and the likelihood of a transfer to another store was slim. I had been morosely looking at job listings for the last few days. This was the first one that stood out, if only because I was bored, and it was weird. So I sent an email. Half an hour later, I had a response telling me to go to a particular office building in an upscale part of the city at the precise timing for my, quote, screening. I went, and after waiting a few minutes in the lobby, I was taken to an office where I was given a series of forms and questionnaires to fill out. They collected them and told me they would be in touch. I'd almost forgotten about the whole thing until a month later, I got a call saying I had moved on to the second stage of the hiring process. I was again given an address and time, and when I arrived, this time it was a different nice office parked 20 miles away from the first one, I was met by a man who introduced himself as Mr. Solomon. He escorted me to a large room that contained a chair and a desk. On the desk were two large monitors, a keyboard and a mouse, and a bolted down metal box with two oversized buttons on it, one red and one green. He told me this room was a model for the place I would be working if I took the job. He described the job as followed. I would be working 7 shifts of 6 hours every week. My job would be simple. I would arrive at work 10 minutes early and enter an outer area that was like a locker room. I would have my own personal locker. I would store all of my belongings in the locker and change into the provided work clothes. I was never, under any circumstances, to carry any item of my own into the surveillance room. I was never, under any circumstances, to take any item with me from the surveillance room. I apologize for noisy cars. As for what I was to do in the surveillance room, I was told that the monitor on the left would constantly show a live stream from a high-definition camera in a remote location. My job was just simply to watch the camera. Once an hour, I would get to the computer attached to the right monitor and enter a brief log describing anything interesting that occurred in the last hour. I would have no pens or pencils or paper. I should never try to take any kind of written notes about the work. As for the red and green buttons, the red button was only to be used if there was an emergency. This meant something on the video or in my workspace that required outside help. The green button was to be hit if I saw something on the video feed that was particularly noteworthy. It would tell other people somewhere that, at least in my opinion, something interesting was going on. Solomon stressed that while I was given discretion on when to use a button, I should err on the side of only using it if and when something, quote, of real significance occurred. He pointed out the camera on the ceiling of the room we were in. He said the real room would be the same. My work would be observed, and other people were watching the room on the video feed as well. He said I was only a redundancy in case other systems failed. He then smirked and asked if I knew what he meant by redundancy. I nodded, trying not to show my irritation. I don't talk that good to people, so sometimes I think I'm dumb. It's okay. Let him think that if he paid me good enough. Pay was very good. $35 an hour. Especially for 5 years ago, that's pretty fucking good. This worried me. I was already thinking this in some kind of psych experiment or secret government job, which I was okay with, but that kind of money to sit and watch a screen. My mom always told me that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is, and this was seeming too good to be true. I asked if I was going to be doing anything illegal. Solomon laughed and said no. I asked if anyone was going to get hurt. Again, he shook his head no. He said the reason they were paying so much was because they needed employees that were motivated to be professional and discreet. The work they were doing was important, and for various reasons, it couldn't be discussed. If I took the job, I would have to sign papers promising I would never discuss my work there, or I would be sued or locked up. I'm only breaking that now because of everything that's happened. So I took the job. And because they wanted me to start right away, I had to quit the store with no notice. I felt bad about that, but I was excited about the new job too. There's a lot of money and seemed like easy enough work, if a bit boring. I was nervous that there was something more to it, but I told myself I would just have to see. No point in chickening out and wasting a good chance because I let my imagination go crazy. I was given the location of the job itself, and when I went there, I was amazed that it was really just like the model room I had been shown before, with only a few differences. There was a locker room you had to pass through to enter the surveillance room, and there was a small bathroom attached to the real surveillance room also. The real room had a small water cooler in there in the corner, but because I wasn't allowed to bring anything in with me, I had to eat before or after every shift. The biggest difference, of course, was that the monitors were turned on. The right monitor was just a black and white terminal like you see in the movies sometimes. I could type in my logs, but no internet to look at anything. The left monitor was a video of a room. You would call it a bedroom, I guess, because it had a bed in it, but it had lots of other stuff too. A TV, a sofa and chairs, a couple of tables, and plenty of empty space in between. The camera must be high up in a corner because I could see pretty much everything except for the far sides of furniture. At first, though, I didn't notice any of that stuff. All I saw was her. She looked to be a little older than me and was very pretty. When I first saw her, she was laying on her side on the sofa. That was the part of the room farthest from the camera, but the picture was very clear and I could tell that she was just sleeping. I found myself leaning into the monitor more so I could see her better, and then I thought about what I was doing and felt embarrassed. It's like I was spying on her, a peeping Tom, my mom used to call it. I didn't want to be a peeping Tom, but I don't want to be silly either. I needed to think about it slow. It was a good job. I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? I wasn't hurting anybody. The woman looked fine, and the room was nice. She probably agreed to be there, and it's all some sort of experiment or something. I was just overreacting. So I sat in the chair and began my work. It didn't take long before I understood more. The woman, I took to calling her Rachel, wasn't there of her free will. I never saw her hurt, but it was clear that she'd never left the room except to go into what I think is a bathroom area that my camera couldn't see. Well, she never left the room on her own. Periodically, usually a couple of times during the week of my shift, men and women in strange-looking outfits would come in and take her from the room. Sometimes she would struggle, but usually she would just go along with her head hung low. They'd always bring her back, though the times when she wasn't brought back during my shift were always the worst for me. I would worry about her until I got to work the next day and saw her in the room watching TV or painting. She never looked hurt or even that upset except for when they took her. And even when she fought, they were always gentle with her. Still, I knew something was wrong. I considered quitting the job or hitting the red button and getting someone to come in so I could get some answers. Or calling the police and showing them what the camera was showing me. Except I was scared. Scared of losing my job, and scared of what these people might do to me if I quit or told on them. Solomon had told me when I took the job that part of being discreet was not asking questions. I would never be asked to do more than what I had already been told, but I could never tell anyone what I did or saw, and I could never ask questions about what I was doing or why. So I made excuses. It was all experimental. She was crazy or sick and they were trying to help her. She was doing a job just like I was. Or if she was really a prisoner somewhere, at least I was watching to make sure that she was okay. If they ever tried to hurt her or I saw that she really didn't want to be in there for sure, I could help then. In a way, I told myself, I was helping to protect her by watching. I don't expect you to think much of my excuses. I don't think much of them myself, especially now. But in my defense, when things changed, I didn't ignore it or try to explain it away. I knew something had to be done. Rachel would usually paint for an hour or two every day, and it seemed to always be during my afternoon shifts. The room had no windows as far as I could tell, but I guess she either used a clock or her own body's time to keep to a kind of schedule. I always liked to watch her paint. The thing she was painting was always facing the wrong way for me to see it, but I could see her face as she worked. She always looked so peaceful and happy when she was painting. And seeing her that way, smiling sincerely from time to time as she got something the way she wanted it, always made my day. I first noticed something was wrong when she started painting more frequently a few weeks ago. Her expression was more focused and serious. There was attention to her movements that I wasn't used to seeing. At first I thought she was just really trying to work hard on something, and I wanted to tell her not to worry. Every few weeks the others would come in and take the old paintings out anyway, bring in a new stack of, I think the word is canvas? But it was more than her being focused. Something was wrong. She didn't look happy and she was going for hours at a time. In the span of 3 days, she had finished 4 paintings. I'd been growing more and more worried watching her work, and when she finished the fourth, I found myself telling her to just stop and rest a while. I had grown accustomed to talking to the monitor, talking to her in my own way, but she didn't stop. Instead, she began moving the paintings, arranging them on the back of the seat of the long sofa at the far end of the room. This was the first time I had gotten to see any of the paintings. Even when the others were taking them out, they always seemed to be turned away from the camera. I was still worried about her, but I was also happy to finally see something she had worked on, happy and amazed. They were beautiful. One was a beautiful green forest, another was an old stone well, the third was a house sitting alone on a small island. The last was an old-fashioned looking movie theater. All of them looked like something out of a dream, with the trailing lines of color mixing in the air around them like leaves caught in the wind. It was only when I looked close that I realized the lines of color weren't random. They were words. Easy to miss if you weren't looking close, and by themselves, they didn't mean much. Just the ghost of a word somewhere in each of the paintings, easy to lose in everything else that was being shown. I leaned into the monitor and squinted, trying to read the words. And my heart started thudding as I made them out. Blinking and rubbing my eyes, I looked again, reading them out loud in order. Left to right, top pair, then bottom. Please help me, Thomas. I pushed back from the monitor, my hand over my mouth. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how any of this could be happening. It wasn't just that she was asking for my help, though that was a big part of it. My name is Thomas. That was part one. There's apparently multiple parts, so I think we're going to be going through this one for a little bit. Hi, Thomas. Welcome to your new job. Okay. My job is watching a woman trapped in a room, part 2. I thought about the camera above me and took my hand away from my face. I rolled back to the desk and sat there, trying to stop from shaking, trying to make myself take a breath. Think about it slow. The first thing was, should I hit a button? The red button was for emergency. She was a prisoner or something, and she was trying to escape. They might think that that was an emergency. But no one had been hurt that I knew of. And I think Mr. Solomon meant to say that for something like that was a police or ambulance emergency, not something like this. But what about the green button? This was definitely something noteworthy. Not only was she asking for help, but she was asking me for help. I made myself stop for a moment. I couldn't know for sure she was asking me. I had gone to school with several boys named Thomas. It was a common name. The chances of her painting that name when I was working here. I didn't want to be silly, but I wasn't trying to be too... What's the word? My mom used to say it when she read her angel books. Skeptics? I didn't want to be a skeptic either. I had to believe it was probably meant for me. And that was something that they would want to know. But should I hit the green button? My hands were drifting towards the metal box on the desk, but I hesitated. I didn't like breaking rules, and I was scared of what would happen if I broke these. If they really were holding her prisoner, then they were probably very bad people. But I didn't know that. Maybe they were good and she was bad, but I looked back at the monitor for the first time since reading the words. Rachel was already moving the paintings back off the sofa, as though she knew the message had been received. A canvas in each hand, she glanced up at the camera as she moved across the room, and it felt like she was looking right at me. My chest tightened as my hands moved away from the buttons. No, I didn't think she was bad. I'd watched her for years at this point. I felt like I knew her. I would know if she was bad. Strange as it seemed, in a way she was my friend, and I was going to try to help her. I spent the rest of my shift trying to act normal and think what to do. I knew whoever else was watching might have noticed the paintings or seen how I acted, but I couldn't worry about that. I would try to play it cool and try to think of how I could help her. The only people I had actually met connected to the job were a couple of people when I filled out the papers, and then Mr. Solomon when he showed me the model room and told me the job. I had no way of contacting any of them except through the buttons. The checks were deposited electronically, and I had never run into anyone else who worked at the surveillance room. I thought it made me stop a second. I'd always thought it was weird that I never ran into someone when I was coming or going. The person I was taking over for, or the person who was taking over for me. I always figured there must be other people, other surveillance rooms even, and they just scheduled us so that we didn't run into each other. And I still thought there were others. Part of why I thought that was because it seemed like I wasn't the only person who used my surveillance room. The water cooler, the toilet paper, the soap, they all seemed to go down faster than I think I was using it by myself. If that was true, maybe I could figure out who they were. Maybe they'd be safer to talk to than whoever it was that I worked for. I got off work at 8 that night, and instead of grabbing some food and going home, I drove my car around the block and then parked down the street from the building where I worked. Nothing had changed while I drove around for a minute. No new cars had parked or anything. And if I was right, they didn't send anyone to replace me until they were sure I was gone anyhow. So I sat and waited. I was tired and the street was pretty empty and boring, but I was too excited and scared to fall asleep. Every time a car passed or someone walked down the sidewalk, I tensed. I kept imagining an SUV or a van pulling up behind me, a man getting out and pulling me from my car, taking me somewhere like where they had taken Rachel to kill or torture me. Half a dozen times they almost cranked up and drove away. Every time I would think of her alone in that room. She had no one but me to help her, and I had to try. 2 hours later, a fat, balding man parked and started heading for the building. As soon as I saw he was able to unlock the door and enter, I opened my car door to go to talk to him. Then I stopped. I needed to be smart. I didn't know where they were, but I was sure there was hidden cameras in the locker room and outside the building. If I go running in there and confront that guy, they'll know for sure that I'm up to something. Sighing with frustration, I shut the door back and waited until his shift was over. I considered tailing him, like in the movies, but I was scared I would just lose him or he'd call someone for help. So I waited until he was walking back to his car after a 6-hour shift, hopefully far enough away that the cameras wouldn't see. Then I met the man I came to know as Charles Jeffries. Hey man, can I talk to you for a minute? His back was to me and he just waved his hand absently without looking up. Sorry, I don't have any money. Have a good... He froze as he glanced back at me while talking. Oh god. No, you need to get out of here, kid. We aren't allowed to talk. I could tell he was scared, but I couldn't risk letting him go yet. Not after all this. I stepped up and pushed the door back shut as he was trying to get in his car. So you know who I am. Try not to sound mean. I could hear how mad I was in my voice. He yanked at the door again, but I was holding it. And I was stronger than he was. After a second, weaker tug, he turned around, his face strained and tired looking. Yeah, I know who you are. You were here just like me, and I'm telling you, we aren't supposed to be talking. We aren't supposed to meet, ever. I frowned. Mr. Solomon never told me that. He never said that it was one of the rules. The man shook his head. Mr. Solomon, yeah, well, there are plenty of rules they don't tell you. I bet they didn't tell you that you're going to be watching before you started, did they? Why, just lowered my eyes, he went on. Yeah, me neither. I've been at this job for 10 years. I've seen other people come and go, usually because they broke one of the rules they never mentioned. The only reason I'm here is because I keep my head down and my mouth shut. You wagged a finger at me. You should do the same, if it's not already too late. I felt my stomach curling into a cold knot. Too late? The man rubbed his face. Kid, do you think they don't know that we're talking? Do you think anything happens that they don't know about? He looked back towards the building, a look of sadness and fear in his eyes. Hell, for all I know, you've already killed us both. Shaking his head, he pushed me back and started opening the door. Either way, I'm done risking it. You need to stop asking questions and just do your job. It's a lot healthier. With that, he got into his car and shut the door. I didn't try to stop him this time. Even though I'd already been worried about what he was telling me, hearing it confirmed was paralyzing. What exactly was my plan? He probably didn't know any more than I did, and even if he did, what could I do with anything he told me? I walked back to my car with a heavy heart. I was still afraid, but more than that, I was sad and ashamed. I wanted to help Rachel, but I wasn't sure how. I wasn't giving up, but as I drove back to my apartment, I couldn't think of what I should do next. This wasn't a movie. I wasn't a hero. And the only ideas I had left were to either go to the police, who might be controlled by whoever I worked for, or try to get proof of her being held prisoner myself. As I parked my car and walked into my apartment building, I made a decision. Unless I thought of something better overnight, I would do both ideas. Tomorrow I would break the rule about carrying anything in. I'd use my phone to record a video of the surveillance room, of Rachel and how she was trapped somewhere, and of me telling everything else I knew. And I would email it to every newspaper, every website, and internet channel I could think of. I'd then go to the police and give them a copy too if I could make it that long without getting caught. Maybe if I did all that, even if they got me, someone would help Rachel. I was filled with worry and dread at the idea of being hurt or killed. A part of me kept saying I should just do as I was told and hope that it all went away. But I couldn't live with myself if I did that. Even if I messed up, I felt like I had to try. So preoccupied, I didn't hear the person coming up behind me as I unlocked my apartment door. Thomas? I turned around and felt my legs weaken as I stumbled back against my door. I had to be dreaming or crazy. I grabbed the doorknob for support as I looked at the woman in front of me. It couldn't be her, but somehow it was. Rachel? That was part 2. Weird twist of events of Rachel's not a prisoner. Question mark? Short dinner interlude. We have a part 3. Actually, how long is this? I assume there's several parts to this. Those are comments. Trying to get to the bottom without reading the bottom part. Comments. Oh, there it is. Oh, there's a part 4. Seems like a very long story. That's okay though. I'm liking this one a lot, actually. It's very compelling. I like the first person view as well. Alright, my job is to watch a woman trapped in a room part 3. She hesitated a moment before breaking into a smile. Is that what he called me? I like it. My name is actually Melanie, though. I felt my face reddening. Of course her name wasn't actually Rachel. That was just something I made up in my head. Still, my embarrassment couldn't keep up with my confusion and joy. Is it really you? She nodded. Yeah, it's me. Rachel, Melanie, grunted as I stepped toward and started hugging her. Laughing, she hugged me back for a moment. But then she whispered in my ear, Thomas, we need to talk, but not out here. Can we go inside? I broke away and nodded, wiping at my eyes as I tried to finish unlocking the door with a shaking hand. My heart was pounding, and I felt like I was in a strange and wonderful dream. But when we had gotten inside and sat down in my living room sofa, I forced myself to focus on the biggest question I had. How? Melanie had still been smiling as we sat down, but now she looked worried and sad. Excuse me, Thomas, that's what I'm here to tell you. Things aren't like you think they are. They never have been. I frowned, a new line of fear cutting through my happy haze. What do you mean? She held the bridge of her nose for a moment, looking down like she was trying to figure out how to say whatever it was she had to say. Thomas, you're part of a psychological experiment. I've been part of it for longer than you have as one of these actors, and I still don't know all the details. I'm pretty sure it's run by some government agency, and I know they're investing a lot of money and time into it, but for what reasons, that I'm not so sure. I realized I was wringing my hands. No, that wasn't right. It couldn't be right. This was some sort of trick. Melanie went on. What I do know is that you're being watched as a long-term subject. They have constructed this whole scenario where you do a secret job watching someone, me, who looks like they might be trapped. They give you instructions and a way of making choices. You've got buttons or something you can choose between, right? I nodded weakly, my tongue thick in my throat. Yeah, a red one and a green one. She sighed and nodded. I think that you're testing how much you'll obey. What choices you'll make based off your morals, your intelligence, and your fear. It's interesting, or at least I thought so when I first joined up 6 years ago. They've never officially given me many details, just the overall gist. But people talk. The other actors and me, sometimes we hear things and we gossip, she smiled sadly. That's what caused me to start feeling bad. I interrupted. Other actors? Melanie's eyes widened. Oh, shit, yeah, sorry, I think they still call him Mr. Solomon? And there are others too. And I just stared at her, she went on. Anyway, for a long time it was just the normal job, right? Spend 6 hours a day acting like I'm this trapped girl, mainly faking painting or watching TV. You know, boring stuff. Couldn't help but interrupt again, hating the hurt trembling in my voice. You faked the painting? You aren't really painting those wonderful pictures? Now Melanie looked embarrassed. No, sorry. I can't paint a bit. I'm a pretty good singer though. She tried to smile, but faltered. Reaching forward, she touched my arm. That's why they always have the paintings turned where you can't see them. They're already done beforehand. All you ever see is some blank canvases, and well, when they want me to show you something, her expression darkened as she went on. That's why I had to break the rules and contact you. They started doing this hidden message mind game bullshit. I got worried. Worried you would take it too serious, that you could get hurt or even hurt yourself. As soon as you left your shift tonight, I talked to one of the guys in the video department. He told me about how you had reacted. Showed me how you were still parked down the street from the building. I drove over. Bedroom set is in a building outside of town. I saw you sitting in your car and I almost approached you then, but I was scared of getting caught and fired. So I parked and waited until I could follow you somewhere else and let you know I was okay. I blinked back tears. I'm ashamed to say I almost left a couple of times. I don't want to lose this job, and I tried to tell myself you'd be okay after a day or two. I could get them to change the script enough that you felt like I was okay and wouldn't worry too much. I felt an angry heat growing in my chest. Well, that's nice of you. She looked up, her eyes red. I know. I'm a shit. I'm so sorry. I was being selfish and cowardly, but I didn't actually leave. And then when I saw Charlie leaving the building, I saw you running over to talk to him, and I knew they were escalating it even further. Charlie? Melanie rolled her eyes in frustration. Shit. Yeah, sorry. Charlie Jeffries. He's another actor. In an earlier version of the experiment, he actually played Mr. Solomon, but they decided he wasn't scary enough, so now he's usually in one of the suits. He's actually done that for your version. Well, he's actually done that for your version a lot. You just can't recognize him under all that getup they wear. I kept curling and uncurling my hands in my lap. It was all too much. It felt like a pinball going between anger and relief and embarrassment and confusion. So all that stuff you told me, that was just to scare me? See how I'd react? She nodded as she sniffled and wiped her nose at the back of her hand. Yes, I'm sorry. That's why I knew I couldn't wait any longer to tell you. I could see how worried and scared you were going back to your car. I pulled my arm back from her touch. Well, thanks, I guess. At least you stopped me before I went to the police and looked like a joke in front of them, too. I just wanted her gone, her sympathetic, pitying eyes off me. Thanks for stopping by and letting me in on it. I tried to take my voice down hard and unfeeling, but it came out watery instead. Standing up, I turned away from her so she couldn't see as I started to cry. If you don't mind, I need time to think about everything. It's a lot. A moment passed and then her hand was on my shoulder. Thomas, you don't have anything to be embarrassed about. They're very good at what they do. All you did was what you thought was right. Because you're a good man. I shrugged. I thought that you were in trouble, and I wanted to help. She gently turned me towards her, and when I looked up, she smiled and sniffled again. I know. But you need to realize most people wouldn't have tried to help. Not when it meant giving up their job or risking themselves like that. Not for a stranger. I wiped at my face as I looked away. Well, I still feel dumb, but glad it's not real. I'm glad you're okay, that we both are. I paused and caught her eye again. We are, aren't we? Safe, I mean. She hesitated before nodding. I think so. Like I said, they have a lot invested in whatever this is, and the fact that they're willing to go as far as they have with you makes me wonder, but I've never seen any signs of anyone getting hurt. I think the worst that could happen is one or both of us gets fired. I felt my face getting red again. Oh, don't worry about that. I'm going to quit tomorrow. I'll finally get to hit their damn buttons, maybe both of them. I started to smile, but then I saw the look on Melanie's face. Thomas, please don't do that. I don't think they would hurt us, but if you up and quit, they'll figure out how to talk to you. I don't think they watch us all the time, but I don't know what they can find out. You know, tracking cell phones, spy satellites, whatever. I'm taking a big risk just being here, and I don't want them catching on. I took a step back from her. So you want to keep getting paid to trick people like me? She reached out and grabbed my right hand. I had been clenching it unconsciously, and it relaxed at her touch. No, I don't want to, but I wasn't expecting this. How the experiment has changed, getting to actually meet you. I can't do it long term, but another month or two to save up money? Now that you're in on it and won't be scared or hurt by it anymore? She smiled. That I can do. That we can both do. We can keep going on like normal. Take some more of their money and then one of us can quit. Next month the other one can too. How does that sound? I shrugged uncertainly. It made some sense, and once I had calmed down, it'd probably make more. She gave my hand a squeeze. When this is all over, I want to get to know you better. I know you've been playing a role, but for the most part, that's been me you've been watching all this time. I think it's only fair I get to see more of you too, she blushed. Assuming that you're interested in that. I felt my hand growing clammy in hers as my stomach fluttered. Well, I mean... Yeah, I would really like that. Swallowing, I added, how long do we have to wait to see each other again? Brief pause in the story. I wasn't expecting this to turn into a romance. It's cute though, but not what I was expecting. Melanie grinned at me. Work another month or so, save what you can, and then quit. I'll wait another 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll do the same. And then she looked up at the ceiling as she pondered it for a moment. And I was struck again by how beautiful she was, even if she was a little different in person than I had imagined. 3 months from tonight, we'll meet right here. I'll come over and we can start getting to know each other better. How's that sound? Returning her smile, I nodded. It sounds great. When she left a couple of minutes later, part of me hated to see her go, but another part was relieved. I was so exhausted, and while I was so happy she was okay and we had finally met, I felt like the burned up wire in an old light bulb. I needed time alone, time to think and calm down, and most of all, time to rest. I didn't really even remember falling asleep, and when I woke up, I realized my alarm had been buzzing for over 30 minutes. I jumped up and raced to get to my shift at work. As she had been leaving, Melanie had stressed again how we need to act completely the same. That meant not freaking out, but also meant not acting like everything was okay either. If I suddenly showed no signs of being worried about her, that would tip them off too. I promised, and she left after a brief hug and a kiss. Oh, scandalous. Remembering that now, through the haze of my tiredness of the night before, it felt like a dream. Still, I went to the surveillance room with a much lighter heart. I didn't have to worry or feel guilty anymore about not helping her, and there was some satisfaction in finally pulling one over on the people that had tricked me for so long. Besides, in 3 months I would be done with this place and go to see Melanie again. In person, at least. Because I got to watch her on the video feed as soon as I came into work. She was asleep, and when I first got there, and I found myself wondering if she was as tired as I still felt. When she woke up later and started reading a book, I found myself beginning to smile and had to stop myself. I should still be worried acting. Not smiling like I had a crush. I had to do better so Melanie couldn't get in trouble. An hour or so later, she started working on another one of her paintings. Watching her work, I was amazed at how real it all looked. It was hard to see everything from my angle, but I would have sworn she had paint on those brushes and was really painting whatever was on the canvas. I found myself feeling proud of her. She was a really great actress. Not only didn't I see her giving any clues that we had met or talked, she really did seem different in the room than she had in my apartment. I suppose that was what she meant by playing a role. I was almost at the end of my shift, and while I hated to leave her, I had to admit I was ready for some more sleep. Trying to guard my reactions all day had been exhausting, and I was dreading the next few weeks. Then I realized she was done painting. I expected her to just go and do something else, but instead she picked up the canvas at its edges carefully, walked it over to the sofa. Her body was blocking it at first, but then she stepped aside. It was a painting of a massive tree. Its bark was dark red with a huge twisting trunk that broke off into a dozen branches. Those branches were covered in leaves that were so deep green they almost reminded me of a storm cloud more than the top of a tree. Like all the paintings, I felt touched by it, even now that Melanie had told me that she didn't paint them. The images themselves, combined with the colors and the small details, they really were amazing. Just like this one, if you look close enough, you can see that there are several small black birds in the branches of the tree. It was funny, but they almost looked like they were made out of words. I felt my heart start to hammer and I forced myself to stay calm. No point in being silly. I knew it was all a game now, and I just had to play my part a little while longer. Still, the worried me would want to know what the words said, and might as well try to read them. I squinted, following the birds right to left, top to bottom. That girl isn't me. I looked away from the painting to see Rachel staring up at me. She looked terrified. Oh no. Ooh. So many twists. So many turns. For anyone that's still here and listening, how are we liking this story so far? I like it. I like this one a lot, actually. There's a lot of emotion behind it. It does really feel kind of like a journal entry of this Thomas character that is breaking these rules of detailing his job without detailing too much into what it is. I just saw what time it is and I need to be up in 4 hours. Oops, so I'm gonna say keep in the background while I go to sleep. Okay. Have a good sleep. Mm-hmm. Alright. Part 4. I had to do something and I had to do it right now. Melanie was somehow a fake. That meant they must have sent her. And if they sent her, that meant they knew. They knew about the messages in her painting. They knew about me asking questions. And they knew I didn't hit a button during any of it. I felt panic and fear crawling up my chest, making it hard to breathe. Standing up, I started pacing, periodically glancing back at the monitor to see if Rachel could help me. Tell me what I need to do next. But she had laid down on her bed. It was hard to tell for sure with her back to the camera, but I think she was crying. No, I needed to fix this, to get her out of there. If I didn't have a better plan, I just had to go with the one I already had. Feeling the hard eye of the ceiling camera on me, I went to the door and stepped back into the locker room. My phone was in my locker, and after messing with the combination the first time, I got the door open and got it out. Gripping it tightly, I tried to hold it by my side casually, but I knew there was little point. If they knew everything, I wasn't going to be able to hide anything. I just had to try and be fast, get some kind of message out to the people that could help Rachel before they got to me. I opened up the camera on my phone as I re-entered the surveillance room and hit record. I made a small beeping noise, and once I was sure it was recording, I turned the camera on myself. My name is Thomas Kaloon, and my job is watching a woman trapped in a room. This is not a joke or a movie or whatever, this is real. For 3 years, my job is to sit in this room, move the camera slowly around the room, taking the door to the bathroom, the water cooler, the desk with the monitors, keyboard and button box, and watch a video feed of a woman locked up in a bedroom somewhere. I stepped closer to the desk and made sure that the monitor showing Rachel was clear and in focus. I didn't know this woman was a prisoner at first, or I tricked myself thinking she wasn't because the money was good. Either way, I know she is now. She's in danger, and so am I. After lingering on video of her for a few more seconds to make sure every detail could be seen, I turned the camera back on myself. I had to hurry or the video might be too big to send quickly. I was trying to stay calm, but I felt myself tearing up as I went on. I did my best to keep my words clear. Please help her. I don't know where she is. I don't know who has her, because I don't know who I really work for. They're bad people. She is not safe. All I know is that I work at a building at address right outside of San Antonio. Per regulations, apparently, in this paragraph. Per NoSleep rules, to be clear, this address is not real. I only know the names of 2 other people connected to this place. The man who hired me, Mr. Solomon, and the man who might have a job like mine. Charlie Jeffries, I think. I don't know if they're real people. I mean, I don't know if that's their real names. Please, I'm not crazy. I know how this sounds. Just come here, see the room, figure out where she is and help her, and hear the muffled sound of the outer door opening into the locker room. I frantically fumbled with the phone to stop recording. How do I send? Oh no, how do I... There it is. I hit the button to share, and I felt a new panic rising. Who should I send it to? I only had a handful of contacts, and I just selected all of them. Maybe at least one of them would take it seriously and get help. As I heard the door to the surveillance room opening behind me, I hit send. Not connected to data service or Wi-Fi. Please send again when connected. What? No. I turned to see Mr. Solomon entering the room. He was flanked by 2 large men in dark suits that looked like bodyguards or something. Raising a finger, he wagged it at me. No service in here, Thomas. But then you should never need service in here, as long as you follow the rules. They took me easily. I tried to take it to the bathroom and close the door, but the two guards stopped me and pulled me down. They put the, what do you call them? Zip ties on my hands and feet and pulled a black bag over my head. Then I was being carried out of the room and it felt like they must have put me in the back of a van that was pulled right up to the building. I was laying on what felt like thin, weird-smelling carpet that covered a hard metal layer underneath. I heard someone get in the van with me, and I asked where we were going. If they would just take me and let Rachel go. There was a short laugh overhead, and then Mr. Solomon's voice as he told me he would explain everything when we got to where we were going. For now, he said, I needed to relax. It was a long drive, and I would need the rest. I wanted to say more, but then I felt a sharp pain in my neck. They had stabbed me, or no, they injected me with something. I was feeling so strange now, but I had to stay awake. I had to try and get away. I had to... Hello again, Thomas. I blinked as I began looking around. My mouth was dry and my head hurt, but otherwise I felt okay. I wasn't tied up anymore. Instead, I was laying back on a padded table, like I'd seen when I went to the doctor. But this wasn't a doctor's office. The room was large, and aside from the padded table, it held a small bed, a desk with a computer monitor on it, and a couple of chairs. Sitting in one chair was Mr. Solomon. I raised up slowly, blinking at him. Where is she? Is Rachel okay? The man smiled. You really are something, Thomas. Trying to be the hero, even if you don't quite know how. I respect that. Hi, Arma. Licking his lips, he leaned forward slightly. In fact, I respect it so much that I've decided to start a new relationship with as much honesty as I'm allowed. Some of my colleagues disagree with this approach, but you know what? Fuck 'em. This is my project, and I think you deserve to know what's going on. Looking more serious, he stood up, lifting the gun he had been holding casually in his lap. But before we get into the details, would you like to see Rachel? Ooh. Thanks for stopping in. I slid off the table and nodded as I caught myself from falling. My legs were still wobbly from whatever they had given me, but I barely noticed. Yes, please, let me see her. The real her. Mr. Solomon gave a small laugh and gestured toward the door nearby. Yes, reality is always best. She's just in there, in the next room. I stumbled my way forward, my legs getting better as I walked, and I grabbed the doorknob. It turned easily. I expected the door to lead to her bedroom, but instead it opened to another room, a lot like the one I had been in. Though the stuff in it was different. Strange machines filled to the walls, and in the back of the room was a large... aquarium? I didn't know. It was a big cylinder taller than I was, and it was filled with some kind of gray liquid. There was a shape in that liquid. Go ahead, Thomas. Feel free to have a good look. You've earned it. I felt my stomach clenching tighter at Mr. Solomon's words and the meanness in them. My legs felt heavy again now, but it wasn't from the drugs this time. Shuffling forward, I could see the shape of a person. Oh no. Or at least a body. Because it was clear from just looking at it that the person was dead. It was very well preserved, but I could see how the skin hung wrong and looked bloated in spots. Oh god. Oh no, no, no. Its hair, which had been floating like seaweed in front of its face, drifted away as I reached the glass. And I could see Rachel staring out at me. Murderer! I turned on Solomon and started to run towards him when he shot me. Suddenly I was on the ground, convulsing as he stepped closer. Don't worry, Thomas. It won't kill you. Just make you unable to move much for a bit. I heard more footfalls as my body began to still. Get him up. Take him back to the other room. I barely feel anything as I carried back to the padded table and propped up to a sitting position. This time I was strapped down, but I guess it was more so I didn't fall off because I couldn't move anything other than my head. and even that just a little. I could hardly see it all for crying, but I recognized the blurry shape of Solomon sitting back down in front of me. Before you ask, well, when you are able to ask anything again, yes, that is Rachel. Not a fake Rachel, not a dummy, not some kind of trick. As I said, this time for tricks is past. Now is the time for truth. Frowning slightly, he went on, Thomas, I understand that showing you her body that way might seem very cruel. You may hate me for now. I would understand it if you did, but you called me a murderer. And at least in this specific context, I think that is unfair because I didn't kill Rachel. In truth, I've been with this aspect of the project for only 7 years. He gestured back to the door behind him. Rachel has been dead for over 8. I felt my eyes widen as though they belonged to someone else's body. There's more lies, more tricks, all of it. Oh god, it had to be. Do you know what remote viewing is? He rolled his eyes. Sorry, right, you can't talk right now. I'll just assume you don't. Remote viewing is a broad term for the ability to see things that are far away from you physically, to know things that you shouldn't be able to know through your normal 5 senses. Some describe it as a psychic ability, though there are several schools of thought as to how and why it works. His eyes fixed on mine intently. Because it does work, Thomas. Various governments and private organizations have studied it for a long time, and while publicly it is always ridiculed as a pseudoscience and foolish superstition, the reality is that some people have the innate ability, that means it comes naturally, to somehow see other places. Rachel was one of those people. She came into the program when she was 17, having been identified via a front-facing screening process that was ran as a psychological test that paid subjects well at the time when Rachel was looking to make some money. 3 months after being identified as a good candidate, she was taken, and after the initial adjustment period, she became a largely compliant asset that quickly rose to the top of our talent pool. Solomon folded his hands on his knee. I know you cared for her, Thomas, so I think this is worth sharing. Rachel was never treated badly, other than her confinement and the occasional test that was mildly unpleasant. No, we all treasured her. She was enormously talented, not just as a remote viewer, but as an artist. That's how she would convey what she saw, you understand. She would enter into an almost trance-like state when she painted, and when she was done, she would have given us a painting of images and words that provided, well, it was very valuable information. He chuckled. Have you ever wondered, that's why there was always such care that the paintings were never shown to the camera? Picking at his pants, he went on, Rachel was so talented that she was selected for a new program that we thought might greatly enhance or alter her ability. We introduced something foreign into her body. At first, nothing seemed to change. If anything, the accuracy of her remote viewing was declining, which was a problem for us and for her. But then we realized that we were reading the new paintings wrong. She was able to see more clearly than ever. She was just no longer bound to only current events. Now her sight transcended time. He paused, and I realized he was enjoying telling the story. The bastard was having a good time pausing to make it more dramatic. I'd fucking kill him. While this made some of her paintings less immediately useful, they became much more valuable as we were able to decipher them. For a time, it looked as though everything was working better than we'd ever hoped. His lips thinned, and then one day, she showed a painting to the camera. I said, "Please help me, Thomas." This immediately went up in all kinds of red flags. She knew not to show the paintings to the camera, and now she was trying to communicate with someone? We didn't disrupt her routine, but an intensive investigation began into who she was talking to. Was it one of her handlers? One of the technicians? Someone from her past life? But nothing checked out. Leaning back in his chair, a look of pride grew on Solomon's face as he continued. I was the one that first suggested the idea that she was, intentionally or not, knowingly or not, seeing and talking to someone in the future. I was still an outside consultant at the time, but by that point, we had more strange behaviors from her, including the second message painting, "That girl isn't me." My theory made some sense, but it very quickly ran into a greater obstacle. The introduction of the foreign material had not been as seamless as we had hoped, despite her having been stable for almost 3 years since it was implanted. Whether it was due to her increasing emotional upset and stress, or simply the passage of time, she suddenly began to deteriorate. Her work became more erratic and hard to understand as her body began to decline. We were monitoring her health closely, but it didn't matter. 5 days after she painted "That Girl Isn't Me," she suddenly went into cardiac arrest and died. Somewhat inexplicably, we were unable to resuscitate her. The man sighed. This was a great loss. It required adjustments of my theory. Based on everything we knew, it still made sense that she was talking to someone. Someone with access to the camera feed, and likely someone named Thomas. Thomas was viewing that camera footage in the future, as I believed, and he must be working for us in the future. He gave me a thin smile, and whether he believed that the future is set in stone or not, I'm all for giving it a helping hand. 7 years ago, I began the Thomas Project. Over the course of the time, I've overseen the screening and hiring of 43 men named Thomas at several different sites, all with one very specific job: to watch the videos of Rachel from just before her implant to the time of her death. I tried to speak, but my mouth still wouldn't work. I wanted to say he was lying, that it didn't make sense, that it was another trick, but I think I wanted to hear more for myself. Because I didn't think he was lying. I didn't think he was a trick. And I thought I was starting to understand. The point wasn't really them watching the videos, of course. It was how they reacted to watching the videos. What they did, and how they matched that up with what Rachel had done in response in the past. 13% quit after the first day. 38% hit either the red or green button after the first message asking for help and saying their name. 22% attempted to contact the authorities before reaching the stage of where Melanie was introduced. He shook his head slightly. I wish I could take credit for her introduction, but it wasn't my suggestion. We assumed from the "That Girl Isn't Me" message that there was a double of Rachel introduced to you at some point. Perhaps to kill you, or dissuade you, or find out what you knew. But it took a few tries until we felt that it was well refined. And as I pointed out, only 27% made it that far. And all of them failed the next test. He pointed at me. Her name. You see, the girl you've been watching, that talented, wonderful girl whose body is preserved in the next room, her name was Rachel Donovan. I'd always wondered if Rachel was merely seeing you, or if there was some kind of connection between the two of you. When you called Melanie Rachel, I knew that we had finally found the right Thomas, the distant point of light that our Rachel was looking at across space and time. I swallowed thickly and found I could feel my tongue, if only a little. Slurring badly, I pushed out a single word. Why? Solomon looked surprised. I have thought that'd be clear by now. You're our only remaining link to one of our greatest treasures. Perhaps you have a similar ability, or it may be that she forged the link purely through her own talent and will. But either way, you are important, and you have more work to do. He stood up and moved over the table where he turned on the monitor. As it came to life, I saw it was a frozen image of Rachel's room. They paused where I left off watching. Turning back to me, the man looked solemn. You have to watch the rest of it, because Rachel painted you more pictures before she died, and we have to know what they mean. We have apparently a final part to our long series. Oh, excuse me. One last interlude. Alright, final part. My job is watching a woman trapped in a room by Verastahl. I spent the next 5 days watching Rachel die. From the outside, just watching the monitor, it didn't seem that different than what I'd been watching for the past 3 years. Rachel slept, she watched TV, she read, she painted. There were signs if you were looking for them. She seemed tired and tense. She had taken to sleeping more. And occasionally, just once in a while, she would glance up at the camera, at me. It was then that I could see the fear and sadness in her eyes. Inside it felt like a burned out house collapsing in on itself. At first I refused to watch, to do anything that they wanted me to do. Solomon didn't get mad at me, but he just shrugged. He said while cooperation was preferred and could go a long way towards making my stay with them more comfortable, it wasn't required. If he was right, Solomon said with a thin smile, things would play out as they were meant to, regardless of what I wanted or thought I chose. Either way, he added, the video was about to start back playing and would not stop for another 5 days. Whether I wanted to spend that time getting to see her again was entirely up to me. I tried to not watch, but part of me knew from the start I was going to. Maybe I could find some clue that they were lying about her being dead. Or Rachel could give me some advice or warning about what I need to do next. I didn't know. I did know that I couldn't miss the chance to see her again. And despite knowing in my heart that she was dead and everything on the video happened a long time ago, I still felt that by watching I was with her somehow. I'd been taken away from everything she knew when she was barely grown, trapped for years just for being special, experimented on, treated like property, kept from ever having friends or family or a life. And yet, through all that, she was still beautiful, not just on the outside, but on the inside too. I spent years watching her, getting to know her in 1,000 tiny ways that so few people would ever truly know each other. I had seen her kindness and grace in her actions, even when she was fighting against the people holding her. I had watched her strength when she woke up day after day in the prison and never gave up. And I saw the beauty of her soul in her paintings, full of swirling colors and wonder. She was able to paint these things she saw with such care and love, despite living in a world that had abandoned her so completely. Well, I wasn't abandoning her. I would watch every bit of the video I could manage, try to burn into my memory every frame of her that I saw. Not for them and their stupid project, but for me and for her. I might not have much to do in my life before they lock me away somewhere or kill me, but I could do this one last thing. Rachel wouldn't die alone. I watched nearly all of it, stopping only to eat quickly and use the bathroom until the last 2 days. I would ask the guards to pause it, but they'd only shake their heads and say Solomon said it had to play normally until it was finished. By the 4th day, I was in a stupor. I had already dozed some of the first 3 days, but when I woke up on the 4th day, I could tell that a few hours had passed. There were 2 trays of food on the bed, one breakfast and another lunch. I looked back at the screen in a panic, worrying I had missed something, but Rachel seemed to be just waking up too. I noticed her putting her hand to her stomach as she got out of bed and felt my own stomach twist. She was already hurting. Rachel glanced at the camera and tried to smile before moving to set up a new canvas for painting. This was the second of 3 paintings she did in those last days. The first had been the inside of an old-fashioned movie theater from the viewpoint of someone sitting in the back row. On the movie screen was just the image of a sledgehammer propped up against a brick wall. I didn't understand what it meant, and I found myself scanning the picture for some message or other clue. Eventually I found what might be one, though I didn't understand it either. Rachel must have come to understand they knew that she was doing with the paintings and didn't want to stop her, because these last 3 she set much closer to the camera. I was still squinting and studying the painting closely when I realized the flipped up seats in the seat in the next row up ahead had brass number plates along the front edge of the seats. Though they were upside down, from the viewpoint of the painting, the angle was good enough that once I noticed them, I was able to read them. 2, 43, 26, 89. I didn't understand any of it, but I committed it all to memory, focusing all my attention on the painting until she finally took it away. Even that early on, I could tell the painting was taking a lot out of her now. And like I had for so long, I found myself talking to her, telling her to go rest before I remembered her body in the next room. I almost stopped then, but no. Maybe she couldn't tell I was talking to her, or maybe she could. Either way, me talking to her couldn't hurt. It made me feel a little less lonely and sad as I watched her. The second painting, the one she started on after I woke up from falling asleep for a few hours, was stranger than the rest. It looked like it was in a room with curved walls made of tree roots, and in the center of the room was a little table made out of the same stuff. Some of the roots around the room were a deep red, but other parts, including the table thing, looked burned and black. I looked closer and saw that I could see a person's shadow over the table, hands holding something long, an oval-shaped bundle. I studied it for a long time, going over it again and again in my mind after she took it away. I couldn't make sense of it, of any of it. I wasn't smart enough, and I was failing her. Rachel slept for a long time after that painting. Then she got up on the 5th day, her last day, and immediately started working again. This time she was painting faster, and while I saw her wince occasionally, she never lost her look of determination as she slashed lines and colors across the canvas. When she was done, Rachel picked up the painting and turned it towards the camera, giving me a small, tired smile as she was blocked from view. She was looking out from the front porch of a house somewhere. It was out in the country, and the morning view of the yard and the land beyond were wonderful, but closer up the painting was of 2 hands. Holding on to each other tightly, their interlocked fingers seemed to glow red and orange in the light of the rising sun. I found myself crying as I looked at it. Part of it was because I didn't know what it meant, and I felt a growing sense of desperation at the thought that Rachel's last works might be wasted on me. Part was because I knew it had been 5 days, and I could sense I was close to the end. To her end. There was something more to it than all that, too. The last painting, even with everything else in my mind and my heart pulling me down, gave me hope. Hope of what, I didn't know, but I started to think that maybe the only message Rachel had for me in the last painting was that somehow, somewhere, everything would be okay. Outside the edge of the painting, I could see motion in the room, people hurriedly coming in with some kind of medical equipment, and then the monitor went black. You've done well, Thomas. Very, very well. For the last 5 days of the video, we had charted 1,047 micro variations in Rachel's behavior that we believe might correspond to your behavior, your reactions, and your emotional states while watching the video. Right before, the two of you remained in sync as though you were in the same room. It really is remarkable. I sat staring at Solomon. I listened to what he said, but I didn't care. I just wanted it over. Whatever this was, I just wanted it over. Clearing his throat, he went on. That's why we've decided to move the implant from Rachel's body to your own. That's one of the many reasons we preserved her cell. A foreign body that was showing signs of life all this time, but just barely. And we were afraid to attempt removal. Our hope is that, given your connection to Rachel, it would accept you. Perhaps even thrive in you more than it ever did our girl. I was suddenly on my feet. It was only the raising of Solomon's gun that stopped me from attacking him. Don't you fucking talk about her like that. Like any of you gave a shit about her, I'll fucking kill you. Solomon's face darkened slightly as his lips thinned. No, he won't. But if idle threats make you feel better, go ahead. It'll only make things harder, not easier. Feeling a stab of panicked fear, I sat back down. What is this thing you're gonna put in me? The man looked at me for several seconds before responding. I'm tempted not to tell you after your stupid and frankly hurtful outburst, but I'll be the bigger person. Letting out a small sigh, he went on. Thomas, somewhere there's a tree, a very special tree. We suspect it's the same tree that Rachel painted for you that time, though we cannot say for sure, as we have never been able to find it. It is either hidden away very well, or it's able to hide itself from those it wishes. I just looked at him, trying to kill him by just wanting it to be so. In any case, we had the next best thing, an ancient clipping from the tree, secured at great cost and sacrifice and studied for a long time without much success. We have, however, in recent years been given advice that this clipping could be grown in the right soil. We thought that soil was Rachel, but while it did develop further inside her, she died before the necessary growth was finished. Leaning forward, he smiled at me. We have it on fairly good authority, however, that you might succeed where she failed. I fought them when they came, but it didn't matter. I woke up sometime later with a dull ache in my chest and a small, already healing scar on my upper stomach. I didn't really feel that different other than a little bit of pain, but I knew that would change with time. Maybe I had more time with Rachel, or maybe I had less. It didn't matter. I just... Wait, what was that? There was some kind of soft voice coming from... where? It wasn't in the room. It was in my head. I felt a thrill of excitement. Maybe this is Rachel's voice. She had somehow stayed in the tree thing they had put inside of me? But no. I'd never heard Rachel's voice, but I sensed this wasn't it. His voice was too delicate to really be heard or understood, and it reminded me of music coming from a distant room that you felt in the back of your mind without realizing it. It was a melody, a kind of song. It wasn't Rachel's song. I realized with a shiver that it was the song of the thing inside me. At first I was afraid, but that didn't last long. It wasn't trying to hurt me. It was trapped here just like I was. But it started to sing. It was time for us to be free. I stood up and walked to the door, and as I did so, the lights went out. The door in front of me clicked, and when I reached out and turned the knob in the dark, it opened easily. How was this possible? And if it could do this, why hadn't it helped Rachel get out? There was no answer, but there was also no time. I could already hear boots around the corner as a glow from the flashlights began to light up the far end of the hall. They would drag me back in there, chain me up, or take this thing back out of me before we could get away. If I was ever going to get out, it had to be now. The voice was singing again, pushing me to go further into the dark, to run until we were safe. So I listened, and I ran. Every door unlocked for me, every turn kept me barely out of sight. The people looking for me were barking orders over a radio, asking someone what was the holdup on the generator kicking on. Whatever the response, the hallways always stayed dark as I drifted through them, blind but not falling, lost but not being found. When I reached the final door, I opened it into a bright afternoon. My lungs burned a little as the first fresh, unrecycled air I had breathed in a week. Blinking, I waited for the voice to tell me where to go, but it had fallen silent. I closed the door as panic began to rise in my chest. All this and I would get caught because I didn't know where to go. I was outside a plain brown building in the middle of nowhere. There was a road going off to the right, and to the left there was Rachel's forest. The first painting to me. I knew it was the same forest immediately, but not just because of it matching the painting so closely. I had some strange sense that felt like a kind of magnetism, or how birds know which way to fly. Looking around for a second, I felt like I was being pulled when I looked again into those woods. This was right. Somehow, I knew this was the way I needed to go. So I went. I made it to the edge of the forest when I heard the noise of men coming outside the building. I thought about hiding, but I knew this was a bad idea. They would just catch me, and I felt a drive to go deeper into the woods. I plunged ahead, running at close to a reckless speed, but never tripping or stumbling as I went. I would occasionally hear a noise behind me as I spread out to search, but the sounds grew fainter as I ran. I almost thought I had lost them for good when I heard a short cough that was quickly muffled off to my left. Someone had gotten close to me without me knowing it. I panicked, looking for any places I could hide. There were only bushes and trees and, over there, a well. Not just a well, but Rachel's well. The same worn gray stone wall capped with a weathered wooden lid. I felt a moment of happy recognition, but then it faded away. How did that help? They checked the well if they found it, and I didn't have any way to get down in it without getting hurt or stuck. Then an idea struck me. Crouching low and staying to the brush, I moved to the well and gingerly pushed on the lid. At first I resisted, but when I pushed a bit harder, the wooden circle slid aside so you could clearly see someone moved it. Glancing around, I eased back into the bushes as I heard soft footfalls approaching. We need to check this out. Think he went down the well? Oh, better hope not. Probably broke his neck if he did, and then it's our asses. I could see the two men approaching. Both of them were wearing dark body armor and carried assault rifles. The older two shrugged back at the other one. Better that than he was hiding there and we didn't check. Looking irritated, the younger man nodded. Oh look. He went over the wall to the well and shoved the wooden lid aside, causing it to clatter to the ground. Hitting a button on his rifle, a flashlight sprang to life on the barrel. He started to shine it down in the well as the other continued to look in every direction. I was worried he would see me if I moved, but I couldn't wait. I just had to stay calm, think slow, and move fast. I kept expecting to hear them yell or feel something or someone strike me in the back, but nothing came. As the afternoon light began to dim, I saw trees thinning ahead. I was approaching a road. It looked like a normal public road too, with several cars passing one way or the other as I walked out of the forest and up the hill to the asphalt. The idea of hitchhiking, especially this close to where they held me, was frightening, but I saw little choice. I was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt they had given me and my own shoes, but I had no money, or ID, or phone. My only chance was to get far enough away that I could try and get help. I jumped slightly at the hiss of hydraulic brakes as a large semi rolled to a stop next to me. The passenger window rolled down as an older man with white hair and a graying mustache leaned over and peered down at me. You looked lost, son. You need a ride? I looked down at the door of the truck. And a logo that said Martinez and Sons Construction and Hauling below it was a cartoon man hitting a wall with a sledgehammer. Looking back up, I smiled at him. Yes, sir, I do. I woke up 5 hours later as we pulled into a truck stop somewhere in Nevada. I had planned on staying awake the entire trip, but that only had lasted a few minutes before exhaustion overtook me. I glanced over at Oliver Martinez and he gave me a toothy grin. I'm tired, but you're plumb tuckered out. I've got to fuel up, shower, and get some grub. I'm gonna go on to California after that. If you want to ride further, just be back here in an hour. Sound good? I nodded and thanked him again for the ride as I got out. I felt groggy from sleeping, but otherwise okay. I just needed to decide whether this was a good spot to ask for help or if I should ride with Martinez further. He seemed like a very nice guy and he would probably try to help if he could, but I wanted to avoid putting more people in danger if I could help it. Looking around, I saw we were in a fairly nice little town. I decided I would go look around for a few minutes and then decide what to do. I was only 3 blocks down the street when I saw the flickering lights in the distance. It was a movie theater. As I got closer, I felt my chest tightening. It was the one from Rachel's painting. Hey there, welcome to Phoenix. The guy standing at the candy counter of the theater looked a little younger than me, and while he seemed friendly enough, he also looked slightly concerned. If you're here for the horror double feature, I'm afraid the second movie is about 30 minutes in. I can give you a half rate if you want to go see it though. I shook my head and tried not to look strange and crazy as I felt. No, that's okay. I recognize this place from a picture a friend of mine painted, so I came to ask if you knew anything about her. He raised his eyebrows and shrugged. Okay, weird. He smiled and added, weird but interesting. Who is she? I swallowed. Her name is, well, it was Rachel Donovan. I expected him to look surprised or excited or angry, but I could tell right away that the name meant nothing to him. Shaking his head, he shrugged again. Sorry, that doesn't ring a bell. I thought you could ask the owner, but he's on vacation this week. Nodding, I searched my mind for something else to ask. Some way to make this place matter the way her other paintings had. Is there anything unique about this place then? It's like history or something? Man grinned, buddy. You're clearly not from here. This place is super boring. Not just the theater, but the whole town. Frowning in thought, he added, the only thing I know about the history of this place is that there used to be a house here that burned down. This was like the 1920s or 30s when this wasn't even a part of town. I couldn't tell you the first thing about it beyond that, but I still bet that's the most interesting thing that's ever happened here. I let out a disappointing sigh. Okay, well, thanks. I turned to leave when the guy called out again. Hey man, sorry I couldn't help more. If you come back, I'll get you a discount on a movie, half off. If I'm not working, tell the marshal I said it was okay. I waved and tried to smile as I headed for the door with a heavy heart. Why did you leave me here, Rachel? What's here that'll help? I was outside again, staring up at the theater's bright blinking signs as though they were going to give some kind of secret signal, when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. There was an alley that ran alongside the theater and went behind it to something. Whatever was back there, the light in a distant security lamp cast shadows along the wall of the alley, and those shadows were moving. Instead of feeling afraid, I felt excited as I started down the alley. Rachel led me here, and I just had to trust that there was a reason for it. Keep looking until the shadows were made by leaves blowing in some kind of wind I couldn't feel. As I got to the far end of the alley, I saw there was a small backyard behind the theater surrounded by a chain-link fence. And on the other side of that fence was the tree from Rachel's painting, with its deep red twisting bark and foam of green leaves waving to and fro in the night air. I felt a surge of warmth in my chest as the distant singing began again. This was the place. A special tree that could not be found unless you wanted to find it. I sat at the edge of the small overground lot, surrounded on all sides by buildings and yards, somehow forgotten when whenever this land was divided up. Despite its location, I had a strong sense that I was the first to see it in a very long time. Climbing the fence, I felt a jagged wire dig into my leg and ripped my pants as I fell over the top. I was bleeding a little, but I hardly noticed. I could smell the tree now, and it was a rich, good smell, unlike any I had smelled before. Reaching out to it, I felt the singing grow louder as I touched it. I felt stronger and less afraid then, and when I saw the light opening up at its roots, I didn't tremble. I smiled. There was a hidden tunnel under the tree, a tunnel filled with sweet-smelling air that was like the tree smell, but also different. And the tunnel wasn't dark. No, not at all. It glowed with its own golden light that called to me, urged me forward. Rain was beginning to fall as I looked around the dark lot. I had the thought I was leaving this world behind. I found I didn't mind that much at all. The tunnel had to continue to grow, slanting down gently, and tall enough that I walked in without stooping. The roots of the tree went on, woven through the dirt walls as I went deeper. I looked back and saw the tunnel had closed behind me, but I wasn't surprised. The way forward was the only way that mattered. I walked for what might have been hours, but I never felt tired or hungry. And I've never worried I was lost, though I had no idea where I was or where I was going. Still, I felt a surge of happiness and excitement when I turned a corner and saw something in the tunnel ahead. As I got closer, I realized it was a brick wall. But just as I began to think I had found a dead end, the wall faded away, revealing a dark room. I paused at the edge of the tunnel, looking out at the floor of what looked like a basement. It was empty, but in the light from the tree I could make out something scratched into the floor. It was the number 2. I felt my pulse quicken as I thought back to Rachel's painting with the theater seats, and then stepped out into the room. It was the empty basement of a house, and as I went up the stairs and opened the door, I saw that the rest of the house was empty as well. No lights were on, but bright sunlight poured in through every window. In the distance, I could hear what sounded like a small wave crashing on the beach. I wanted to go out and see where I was, but I forced myself to check the house first for any people or clues. But there were none. The house was utterly bare of any sign of people other than the numbers scratched into the floor below. My nose tingled with salty air as I stepped outside. The house was near a beach on what I soon figured out was a small deserted island. I realized with little surprise that I recognized the house from Rachel's painting. As I stepped off the porch, I saw no signs of people. I wasn't entirely alone, because sitting some distance from the house was the tree. I knew it couldn't be the same tree as the one in the abandoned lot, but at the same time, I knew that it was. Or at least a different part of the same tree that made the tunnels and appeared in my old world and whatever this place was. Because I had started having that thought as soon as I stepped out of the house. I didn't think this was my world. Not exactly. I could see a larger island some distance away, and it might have people on it. Hotels and cars and planes. Or it might not, and those things might not exist here. Either way, my newfound intuition was growing stronger, and I could tell that what was it called? The texture of how things was different somehow. If only a little. Not bad or scary, just different. Still, after a couple of hours exploring the island and checking the house, I began to feel terribly lonely, even with the tree nearby. I decided to go back to the tunnel and keep going. The basement wall faded away as I walked up to it and entered the tunnels again. It was only a short time later that I found my second version of the house. Much like the first, the wall faded away into a basement, but this one was far from empty. It was a workshop of some kind, full of tools. Excuse me, I wasn't familiar with it. I glanced down and saw 43 scratched into the floor. Who was doing that? And why? I was going to explore the house more carefully this time, as it looked like there were people here, but then I froze. Propped against the brick wall, next to a small stack of boards, was a sledgehammer. Trying to be quiet, I crept over it and picked it up before heading back into the tunnel. When I was little, before Dad died, he had loved to hunt. I never went with him and don't remember much of what he hunted, but I do know he had an old hound he'd had since before I was born. The dog had only loved him. Well, him and being on the trail of something. When Rocker, his name was Rockefeller, got a scent, it was like he was in a trance. He would go and go, this way and that, and to look at him, it looked like he was having a fit, both lost and certain at the same time. But whatever Rocker knew or didn't know, he'd always found what he was looking for. I felt like Rocker now. I was moving faster and faster as I went down this turn and that. I felt like I was on the trail of something or traveling on memories I didn't have. Gripping the sledgehammer tightly, I could hear the rising hum of the distant music in my head as I turned to the last corner, and then it fell silent. There was another brick wall, and as I approached, it fell away. It was another basement room, but this one was much smaller. It contained a table, a clothes chest, and an old metal bed that had been broken apart. Hi, Kylie. Welcome. At the far brick wall, a woman was using one of the metal legs from the bed to attack the wall and whatever lay behind it. I felt my head begin to swim as I looked at her from behind, and as she turned to look at me, eyes wide with surprise and fear, I felt the sledgehammer slip from my grip as I stumbled back against the now solid wall. I could barely breathe at all, but I managed to get out a single word. Rachel? The woman looked at me, her expression less fearful but still guarded. She had the bed leg partially raised in warning. Yeah? Do I know you? It was her, but it wasn't, much like the tree on the island. This Rachel looked a few years older, and while she looked stressed and confused at the moment, her eyes didn't seem weighted down by the same quiet sadness I had come to recognize watching the other Rachel for all that time. Still, I didn't know how to answer her question and not sound creepy or crazy. I stared at her for a second, floundering, when she asked another. You came out of the tree tunnel, right? I nodded, grateful for something I could answer easily. Studying me, she said, "Where did you come from? Before the tunnel, I mean." I flushed as I tried to think of the right words. Well, I came from Texas, originally, I mean. She grinned at me for a second before catching herself and trying to look serious again. Yeah, okay, but like, you know how the tree works? How did you find out about the tunnel? How did you get here? Sighing, I rubbed my head and started into it. Look, I know this will sound crazy, but I had a job watching a woman trapped in a room, and that woman was you, or another version of you, and she asked me for help, and I couldn't help her, and then they took me, and I found out she had been dead for a long time, but could see me in the future, and then they put something in the tree in me that had been in her that killed her, and then I escaped, and then I figured out where to go to find the tree from the thing she had painted, and somehow knew how to get in the tunnels to find different spots, and I'm pretty sure the tunnels lead to different worlds, and I got the sledgehammer, and then I... Hold on, god damn, take a breath. You're gonna pass out. She was smiling again, and this time she didn't try to hide it. She looked over what was left of the bed to where the sledgehammer was laying on the floor. Did you say sledgehammer? Whack. So, yeah, I believe you. Whack. I've been in those tunnels too. My ex-boyfriend tricked me into moving here so he could tie me to the tree in his place. Whack. Well, not tie me to the tree literally. Take his place as the tree's buddy or something? I don't really know. It's all pretty fucked up and I don't understand all of it. Whack. But what I do understand is that fucker walled me up in here. At first I thought I could just pry loose some bricks over time, but no. He put a layer of concrete on the outside this time. Good old Phil, or Justin, or whatever. I mainly think of him as fuckface now. Whack. It's taking forever. I stepped up and put my hand on the sledgehammer. Let me do it for a bit. We can take turns. We had cleared away even more brick than she had already managed, but the concrete wall was still starting to show small cracks. I wanted to keep looking at her, have her talk to me, but I knew she was tired. She nodded reluctantly and let go of the hammer. Before I swung, I looked back at her. How long have you been in here like this? Whack. Rachel scowled. Hard to say for sure, but I think about 8 months? Let the hammer drop down again as my eyes widened. How did you survive all that time? Her scowl deepened. It's the tree. It won't let me die. I just dip into the tunnel every day for a bit and I never get that hungry or thirsty. A thought occurred to me then. Why didn't you just escape through the tunnels? She quickly shook her head. No, thank you. I have had enough of seeing other worlds. Some of them aren't so nice. And I don't want to be more tied to the tree than I already am. I just want out of here, into my own world, and then I can try to figure out how to get free of my connection to the tree for good. Rachel shrugged. I would have done it eventually with the stupid bed parts, but who knows how long it would have taken. She smiled again. I'm very happy you came to help and brought a sledgehammer with you. Returning her smile, I nodded as I lifted the hammer again. Me too. Back. We were both wringing with sweat when we crawled through the hole we'd made in the outer wall. Rachel told me that she thought her ex-boyfriend was long gone, but she couldn't be sure, so we had to be careful. Grabbing the sledgehammer from inside the room, we made our way towards the stairs. The house was decorated but quiet, and we saw no sign of anyone we talked to as we walked up to the front porch and opened it. Outside, the sun was coming up on a new day, and as we walked into the porch, I jumped a little as Rachel took my hand and gave it a squeeze. I looked over at her. I hadn't been able to help the other Rachel, but maybe that had never been the point at all, because I thought now she had been able to see more than just other places or the future. She'd been able to see into other worlds and possibilities. Like this one, where another version of her was trapped and needed help. A place where I wouldn't be hunted and she could be free. In the end, even when she knew she was dying, Rachel had been determined to help us be together and happy. The morning sun painted beautiful colors on Rachel's face, and looking into her eyes, I saw how much she was like the woman I had watched and cared about and tried to save. The woman who, in the end, had saved me instead. I wanted to tell Rachel so many things, ask her so many questions, but all that could come later. Squeezing her hand back, I walked with her away from the house. For now, this was enough. And that's the end. That seems to be the final part of our series of My Job is Watching a Woman Trapped in a Room. That was honestly a good read. It was well composed. There's lots of twists and turns. At the bottom it does link to interesting. Okay, so it looks like there's a series of stories with similar lines of like premise, but not. So I went to they have another story called The Ghost Tree. The first line says you need to push the green button or the red button. Jumped slightly as I brought my eyes up. The guy was younger than me. I felt some sympathy at his expression of tired boredom. Sorry, I guess I spaced out. Interesting. Okay, so this person seems to have a series of this dilemma storytelling. Of this red or green button monitoring. But I will leave it here for tonight. It is incredibly late. It is now hitting the AM times where I am, and not in the nice, oh, it's normal daytime. This is we're hitting past the midnight stages. I still haven't finished my dinner. So I'm gonna end it here. Thank you all for joining me. I will, for anyone watching on YouTube, as I put up my VOD, the links in the stories will be down below in the description. Credit will be put where credit is due. I don't want to take this away from anyone. I super highly doubt that anyone is online that I can read. Yeah, no, definitely not. Well, thank you all. For anyone that is up and awake and watching, thank you for tuning in. I've grown to enjoy telling stories to you guys. I'm glad that this was an experiment I put onto myself, and I look forward to continuing doing it monthly. Maybe next year I'll do it more often, but that's a year and a half away, or rather half a year away. So thank you again for hanging out with me. Hopefully you don't get too many spooky dreams. I will see you tomorrow for probably Paper Mario, because I'm addicted. And or later this week for maybe more Mario and Luigi with Kai and friends. We'll figure that out. But for now, stay safe, stay hydrated. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye!